I said to my Democratic colleagues over the last several days, number one, unfortunately, the vast majority of our Republican friends have made it clear that they have no intention of trying to work with us to address voter suppression or to protect voting rights.
Happy Saturday and welcome to The Deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. It is Saturday, December 18th, 2021. We are 1 week away from Christmas. The madness has already ensued. It's a lot different than last year. I can tell you that. The parking lot is full. I'm looking out the window here at my studio over North Hills shopping complex in Raleigh, North Carolina. There's not a parking space to be had. So somebody has some money. So maybe we'll get a chance to talk about what the economy is really like later on in the show. But we got a plate full. So I need some people to help me out. And we got the regular gallery of experts, Dr. Nicole McFarlane from Fayetteville State and a former professor of political science at North Carolina Central University, Val Atkinson. Welcome back to The Deal, folks.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you.
Val, I know you've been out Christmas shopping. You're probably standing in the line at Macy's trying to buy your Christmas gifts. I know how you love to shop. On a serious note, though, let's jump into that real quick because I want to start our conversation with Senator Warnock and what he was talking about on voting rights. But just the two of you, I'm going to start with you, Val, first. There's been a lot of bemoaning about how bad the economy is and inflation, blah, blah, blah. But I don't see that in terms of how people are reacting. Like I said, I'm looking out the window here. Obviously, last year there was nobody out shopping, but this year there certainly is. What have you seen in as you've been out and about, Val?
Well, I'm going to double up and use this opportunity to do a shout out to the most recent birthday boy in our family. Our grandson turned 2 today. Wonderful big 2. So happy birthday, JJ. And now we can move on with other things. I know everybody in my family is going to go out and bang the stores and that kind of thing. So that might push the price of things up and inflation will go. But Senator Warnock and some other people are absolutely right. Republicans and conservatives have been trying to tie the Build Back Better plan with inflation and anything else they can get their hands on regarding negativity. And it just doesn't work because anybody that knows anything about the economy understands that it's a cyclical kind of thing. And when wages go up, inflation goes up. Doesn't mean that we need to stop getting raises or give raises back so we can keep prices down. The 1%ers don't do that. They don't refuse to take tax cuts because they're afraid of inflation. Seems not to bother them at all. But it's a cyclical thing and we need not worry about it. That's why we got the feds. The feds have the authority and by law can cool down or speed up the economy in terms of turning up the heat by way of manipulating interest rates. They can do that. That's why we have them there. You don't get all excited and go sell the farm because of a turn in the economy. People definitely don't do it on Wall Street. So I would say that some of the concerns about inflation are nothing more than hyperbolic partisanship, and that we need to take it for what it's worth. As you said earlier in your piece, Ed, people are still out shopping. Yes, gas is going up. Yes, the price of my bread is going up, but I got to eat. I got to get from point A to point B. So It's going to happen and things are going to go on and life will continue.
Well, Dr. McFarlane, I don't expect a big gift. You can get whatever while you're out today. But just from, again, I'll ask you the same question. What are you seeing in your world or have people been talking about inflation and have concerns about the economy like the Republicans would like for us to believe?
I certainly think that is the case, that people are concerned about inflation. I think they're just even concerned about the price of gas. It's cheaper to fly to Atlanta than it is to drive to Atlanta from where I live in Raleigh right now. I think that's indicative of, the price of fuel right now. And as everyone knows, this is a huge part of the economy, the travel this time of year. So I do think, even though people will be traveling more, that will be infusing more into that will be infusing the economy with more dollars. But I don't think that's necessarily the best thing long term for our for the economy, or even especially for our ecology. So I just think I think I've really gotten used to and really appreciative of the quiet time that the last 2 years over the holidays have given to me, have gifted me with. I think that's been the greatest gift. I think I enjoy seeing my family, but I don't have to see them on the busiest time of the year when you're more likely to have car accidents, when people are more likely to have heart attacks, because of the inherent stress, right, that goes along with this time of year. I don't miss that at all. I enjoy seeing my family, but I really just like seeing my family in August. I enjoy seeing my family in October. I enjoy seeing my family in March. I don't have to see them at the busiest, darkest time of the year when everyone's rushing around and doesn't have enough money. Sorry, that's just not fun for me.
No. Hey, I'm in the same camp as you. But Val, let's talk about what Senator Warnock was talking about in the intro. He's talking about the inability of the Democrats to be able to move legislation on voting. And we all know that the Republicans are standing in the way of that, because on the state level, they are doing everything they can to mess with voting rights, so on and so forth. But there's also problems within the Democratic Party at the Senate level. Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema. What's the latest on whether or not you think that they'll even come to the table and maybe suspend the filibuster so that they can vote on voting rights? Is that even a possibility with Sinema and Manchin?
It is a possibility, but definitely not a probability. Most people who follow things closely don't think that it's going to happen. Sinema and Manchin have nothing to gain by caving in at this point. After holding out over all this time, they have nothing to gain by saying, okay, we'll go ahead and do that. They do have lots to gain by holding out and saying, no, you can't change the filibuster rule, because if they do that, then the power that they have amassed by this game plan that they're doing still continues. They still hold power. The only way they lose power is they unilaterally and voluntarily give it up. So I don't think they'll do that. They didn't come this far just to cave in now. So Democrats have got to figure out another way how to get things done. And they need to figure it out, as we've said on this show before, in a way that things are in their control. You can't have a goal that depends upon somebody else doing something that you can't control. That's not a goal, that's a wish. That's a hope. You can't control it, so it shouldn't be one of your expectations. So Democrats are going to have to figure out what can they do that's in their power to do to rectify all of these problems that Manchin and Sinema has caused.
Yeah, so I want to remind the folks you're watching The Deal. That's Val Atkinson. Also joining us is our regular Dr. Nicole McFarlane from Bevel State University. Doctor, yesterday, Thursday, the president was at South Carolina State for their commencement. One of the things he did was conferred a degree that Congressman Claiborne had earned back in the 60s that he never was able to walk across the stage to get, because the state of South Carolina did not allow South Carolina State to have two commencements by law at the time. So he had to get it in the mail. So the president gave it to him. But the president also talked about voting rights. Let's play a clip and then we'll talk about that. I got a question.
I've never seen anything like the unrelenting assault on the right to vote. Never. I don't think any of you have on this stage ever seen it. Not a joke. And folks, as John Lewis said, it is the only, without the right to vote, there is no democracy. We've supported Democrats fighting for voting rights bills since day one of our administration, making sure that we have unanimous support among Democrats in the Senate, which we do. But each and every time it gets to be brought up, that other team blocks the ability even to start to discuss it.
So, Dr. McFarlane, the president is in a room full of colored people, and he says that he's never seen an assault on voting rights like he's seen now. Admittedly, it's bad, but didn't a whole bunch of Black folks die?
Yeah, I call BS on that.
I get the sentiment, but I'm not sure it was the right words.
Yeah, I call BS on that. I think a lot of people, that's easy to do. I mean, remember, in fact, Joe Biden was a part of that, at least very friendly and an apologist for that assault, about a half century ago. Very much a part of that assault in terms of his friendliness with opponents to civil rights and voting rights. Yeah, Bill. Bill. I'm losing track of them now. It's like, I'm Joe Biden. Yeah, they're just so it's tiring. I guess this to the extent that white Democratic politicians can just pander to the Black community, and would just sort of nod and go along with it, and amen, yeah, brother, tell it, that. And just kind of go along with it without, really holding his feet to the fire is becoming a bit tiresome. I know I sound terribly pessimistic. I know my take on things is incredibly optimistic right now, but I just don't see a lot of forward progress. I mean, the way he's sidelined Kamala Harris, thus far. I think that he's really doing a lot to place, the Black impact on his administration and his ascent to power very much in the background, as though he could somehow just sort of escape the 8 years that he actually even endeared him to Black folks during the Obama years. But remember, the reason he was even when he was chosen, he was, I think one of the first reasons I was surprised when he was chosen as vice president for Obama, because I remember him saying, well, Obama's different because he's clean and he's well-spoken. So that kind of like when Joe Biden says what he really thinks, he really tells us what he really thinks.
Yeah, I get you. So Val, again, like I said, there's a tone deafness with Joe Biden. Maybe it's age, maybe it's the generation that he's from or whatever. But I get his point that there is an assault on voting rights and they need to take an active role in trying to do something like Dr. McFarlane says, because I don't think they've, had that out front enough, because they've had this infrastructure stuff out front. Is there a way for Joe Biden to recover some of the support from Black folks that he's going to need to be able to do the rest of this? Because he can't lose spectacularly in the midterms and get anything done. He'll just be a lame duck. So as you listen to him talk at South Carolina State, what's your assessment of that?
Well, I go back to the original path that Joe Biden took to get where he is now, to be president of the United States. And Black people and a lot of other people didn't vote for Joe Biden because they thought he was the best guy or thought he was going to be some sort of great president. I know I didn't. I voted for Joe Biden to get rid of the stench of Donald Trump. And I've said on this show before, and I'll say again right now, if Donald Trump runs for the presidency and wins the nomination, Republican nomination in 24, I will vote for Donald Duck before I vote for Donald Trump. It ain't about Joe Biden. It's against whoever they put up there to make my life and a lot of other people's lives miserable. So Joe Biden just happens to have lived in the seat right now. And I hope he does well so he can keep those other bad boys away from me. But I don't, I've never liked Joe Biden since Anita Hill deal. I go way back to that because he could have done a lot of stuff differently. And bragging about his relationship with Strom Thurmond and all those other bad boys. But I tell you what, he ain't Donald Trump. And I ain't about to take Donald Trump just to make tell Joe Biden he ain't living up to what I want him to do. I ain't ready to go that far yet. So I'm gonna have to work with this boy and find out what I can do to make sure we keep the real enemy away.
Yeah, I hear you. You know what? We need to take a break. And when we come back, I want to talk about Bell Hooks, who passed away a few days ago. Dr. McFarlane, I got some questions about her career that I want to talk to you about. On the way out, you're going to see a colleague of ours, Professor Herb Joyner from North Carolina Central University Law School, talking about the other problems that Democrats have in terms of voting, and that's redistricting. So you'll see that on the way out. On the way back, we're going to talk about Bell Hooks. We're going to talk about Kentucky tornadoes. We're going to talk about Omicron. We're going to talk about January 6th. We're going to talk about HBCUs and this guy named Deion Sanders that got a lot of white football coaches throughout the South really scared. So stay right there. We'll be right back after this.
Red territory. And it appears that in North Carolina, the red is winning. That there is a massive effort that is underway right now for the insurrectionist party to take control of Congress and these state legislatures. And if that is the case, that will last for the next 10 years, then the Democratic wave will not have any impact.
I don't believe that there is a difference between the choice to be an intellectual, and I make a distinction between an intellectual and an academic. A lot of academic people write because they have to for their jobs. They're not necessarily passionate about thinking and contemplation. I think one of the differences is that Black people are clearly suffering in this culture collectively, so that there's a responsibility and a sense of accountability that particularly Black intellectuals who are progressive, who are on the left, feel that we have to ourselves and to other Black people, that I think white intellectuals don't, the ones I know, don't tend to feel that they have to address a sort of mass white world or a collective white community by their work.
And welcome back to our second segment of the deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. That is Val Atkinson and Dr. Nicole McFarlane. And, we come in every Saturday to save the world. So we're on our mission again today. You saw a little clip of Professor Bell Hooks, who was at Berea College for a long time, graduate of Stanford University, talking about racism. But she was a feminist writer as well. And Dr. McFarlane, I'm going to start with you because a lot of times there's names sort of in the pantheon of intellectuals that people who go to college know or whatever, blah, blah, blah. And Bell Hooks was certainly there, right, as a feminist writer, that kind of thing. However, sometimes that doesn't permeate down to other folks who don't realize how much her writing probably influenced the ability for you to progress later on. Can you talk a little bit about Bell Hooks, because you're sort of in the same business, right? You write about feminism, you write about gender and race, that kind of thing.
She was an English major, started out as an undergraduate and then went on to get her master's and her PhD in English literature and critical theory. I'm gonna tell you just that, just to give you just some sense of how long she's been, she earned a PhD in 1974. right? She was, you know, very young academic and scholar. I was 3 years old in 1974. Okay. I think about the same time Essence magazine was founded, if anyone still remembers magazine. But the thing was that she actually was a staff writer for Essence at one point. She used to contribute not a staff writer, but she was a contributor from time to time. She would do special segments and things like that. All I can say is that when I began my academic journey, my scholarly journey, Bell Hooks, Gloria Jean Watkins was her real name. She was so much in the groundwater of my thinking and my thoughts that I really didn't realize I was directly quoting her constantly without even knowing it, constantly. And by the time, you know, I advanced a little further, I realized I had to force myself to like, oh, that's a Bell Hooks quote. I have to, it's important to cite Black women, right? But because Black women have been so impactful, and Bell Hooks leading that way, right? Black female academics have been so impactful in shaping the mainstream everyday discourse. We don't even realize how much their thinking is in the groundwater about everyday thinking and existence. So when we say things like male identified, that is that's direct language from Bell Hooks, right? When we say use language like capitalist, the patriarchal capitalist economy, when she was saying things like that in 1974, I mean, like maybe I think you know, maybe Angela Davis was saying things like that, but her stuff was so embedded and so wed to like the Adorno and the Frankfurt School in continental philosophical thought that she didn't write like that for the mainstream. She wasn't using those terms really that much in the mainstream. And by that time, her work was really, you know, much, Angela Davis was kind of seen as an outlier. What Bell Hooks, what she did, she took those ideas, that language, and she just completely enmeshed it with just the way Black women identify themselves. Even Black women who say today that they are not feminists, they cannot start their first tweet without in some way paying homage to Bell Hooks. Bell Hooks is so such an all-encompassing presence in the world of philosophical thought. I mean, she was a major voice. A lot of people don't realize this, in mainstreaming Buddhism and popularizing that for making it possible for Black people to identify with it. I mean, when I would say things like, I teach my students to transgress, I was only able to say things like, I teach my students to transgress because Bell Hooks wrote a book called Teaching to Transgress, and that was so important. Could you imagine me just using that language without Bell Hooks to undergird my my pedagogical ideas? She was a teacher first and foremost. So everything I did from my teaching was really about trying to teach students how to push against the system, how to work against the system, and even if that meant working against me and reading against my syllabus, even if necessary, in order to find their own voice and to find, you know, their own, not just their voice, but in order to push me to be a better teacher and scholar. So I can't even begin to, there really is, like, we're going to be talking about it for years. And when you look at like the taxonomy of the most profoundly influential scholars, I mean, philosophers of the world, of the 20th century, you'll have like a Heidegger, you know, Martin Heidegger, believe it or not. You'll have Michel Foucault, you'll have Deleuze and Guattari, you'll have, and then just out of nowhere, you have this woman from Kentucky, this Black woman from Kentucky, Afro-Latin woman called Bell Hooks. You have all these white men just surrounding her, but then out of nowhere, you just see Bell Hooks, and she has influenced everyone. I remember even when I studied at the European Graduate School in Switzerland, I could not turn around without someone from France, or someone from Austria, you know, Vienna, or someone from Dubai asking me what my thoughts were about Bell Hooks, because she had so profoundly influenced global thought. And I don't think we can ever really fully encompass or fully appreciate it. And it's going to be another 100 years before we realize the impact that she's had. And I know I can go on with this for a long time.
Know that you're watching The Deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. That's Dr. Nicole McFarlane. And thank you for that giving us some understanding about the importance of bell hooks. Because Val, you've been in the academy as well, right? You were trying to teach young people how to think critically and all that about politics. And one of the things that I appreciate about bell hooks, and I've seen her speak a number of times, was that what she could cross connect all these things together: race, gender, politics, all that into a cohesive argument as to why white male patriarchy was dangerous, and this capitalism that we claim is the best system in the world is not necessarily the best for everybody. And you know, you and I have this conversation for the last 35 years, Val, about white male patriarchy in the American capitalist system, and how it does not lift everybody up. I just want to get your thoughts real quick about how I think the response to supposed battle against critical race theory is actually finally responding to people like bell hooks, and they don't want their white kids to know anything about somebody like bell hooks, right? Isn't that right, Val?
Absolutely. They want to sanitize that portion of history that shapes the thoughts of young folks when they come about the business of determining who they are and what they have been about. And they want to sanitize that to the degree that none of the lies that they've told that have made them greater than great are ever challenged. And they know the best way to do that in their mind is to determine what is read by, what is taught by, and what is consumed in our educational system. And that's why it becomes so important in the educational system, as Nicole was alluding to, is that we teach independent thought. It's so important that we get away from the business of ingesting material, regurgitating it, getting a grade, and walking across the stage. It's about much, much more than that. It's about the business of maturation. It's about the business of understanding how to go through the thought process and how to determine mainly, and it's not just for lawyers what I'm about to say, but it's for everybody, how to determine what is fact and what is opinion or what is speculation. That is so important. One of the things that I used to do in each of my classes that I taught was I devoted the first 5 or 10 minutes to what I used to call current events. And some people thought it was comical at first until they determined that it was a part of their grade. Then they began to take it very seriously. And the first thing we had them to do when we talk about current events is talk about the source. Yeah. Where are you getting this information? CNN, the New York Times, your cousin Vinny? Tell me where you get the source. That's very important, because now I know how to listen. Now I know how to formulate my questions if I have questions about what you're trying to sell us. So let's talk about source. So I always pinpointed that as one of the relevant and very important issues in the whole educational progress process. Especially in my case, when you're talking, Nicole talked about pedagogy and that kind of thing. Teaching night school sometimes get into the andragogy part where you're teaching a lot of adults who already know, they think they do, how to process and what's going on, but there's still room left for even adults, even learned people, to go through a process of ingesting and taking on more material. So teaching them how to do that, how to challenge long-held beliefs, how to go through the process of selling what you do believe, but at the same time, listening to thoughts that are different than your own. That's a whole big selling process. And I'll tell you, a lot of people could write books, they could teach classes, and they should do a lot to attend those classes on those subjects.
I'd like to add something, because I just want to say, like, we couldn't even have language like black female agency or black women's agency, or use words, phrases or terms like black representation of blackness. Like those words, right? Those phrases are so ubiquitous now that we can't imagine using it. I can't even, again, like those were terms that almost originally, these coinages come directly out of Bell Hooks's work. And to the point where when we talk about she maintained her relevancy all the way up until the end, even when Beyonce had Lemonade, when they came out, that could be seen and that could be read and understood as a Black feminist text. And that the conversation surrounding Venus and Serena Williams in terms of Black female agency, representation, and self-presentation on the court, and how these Black women fashioned their bodies. Even the way she used the word fashioned, it had a deeper meaning. She had another book called Killing Rage. And I think that was such because it was, and a lot of her titles, a lot of her terminologies had double meanings, which was really interesting, because it was not just like killing rage, but you're not just to kill the rage, but also you are imbued with a killing rage because of the forces of racism. So she was such a wordsmith, because of course she was also a poet. Besides just like being in the world of religion, being in the world of philosophy, being in the world of activism. I cannot, again, we could go on about this, but Bell Hooks really, she provides the lexicon for much of what you see in the Twitterverse right now. Black Twitterati would have no quips, would have nothing to say if it wasn't for the kind of shorthand that was first articulated and developed by Bell Hooks. I want to say that one.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely correct. We're going to switch gears very abruptly, but it has to do with HBCUs, Val. And Black folks scaring white folks. In this case, it's over football. Take a look at this clip, and then we'll come right back.
You've seen one recruit. We wanted him to get all the shine, all the glory, and every darn thing he deserves. Don't think we don't have nothing else in the chamber, all right? We're just waiting, but we're filling the needs that we have on our team. You may not think we have needs, but we do have needs that we must fill, because we want to be great. We're beating teams now, but we want to be dominant. And the way we become dominant is adding and practicing and understanding these kids that love the darn game. We want them to go pro. We do. We want them to go pro on the field and off the field. But that starts on the practice field, and it starts with recruiting. And that's what we plan to do.
So that's Neon Deion, Val. He's down at Jackson State, and he got the top recruit in America that everybody wanted. And Dabo Swinney at Clemson went apoplectic and said it had to be some shenanigans going on. There's no reason for this kid to go to Jackson State. Talk to me real quick, because we were both athletes in college and athletes throughout our lives, and how there's this ownership that white people think they have over our bodies and our athleticism. And then it's an affront to all these white coaches that the top Black kid in football would choose Jackson State over Clemson or Alabama.
Well, I think it's starting down a path that maybe didn't start in sports. When Hannah Jones chose to leave UNC and go up to Howard University. When people like Ta-Nehisi Coates decided to start participating in classes over at Howard University. It's letting people know that, yeah, it's okay if we don't go to the blue bloods, the Dukes, the Kentuckys and Carolinas and Kansases of the world. Also, you had kids making decisions in basketball to play overseas instead of going the route of playing with one of the blue bloods and until they became 19 so they could meet the NBA standards and all those kinds of things. So all of those things together make it easier, I think, for a kid to say, yeah, I'm going to look at a Jackson State or Norfolk State or whatever, in addition to Alabama and those kinds of things. Now that brings up a question, let's see how all of this plays out with Dion and his foray into Tulsa and those kinds of things, because I know it wasn't going to take too long before some major white D1 school gave an offer to a Deion Sanders to bring your skills and talents to us so that we can do well. And it was a lot sooner than everybody thought. But let's see what happens from there. But I'm very glad to see kids making decisions to check out HBCUs in basketball, in football, in other sports, in academia, and a lot of other things. You two guys are a little young to remember when you had to go to Black schools, as I did when I attended high school in Portsmouth, Virginia. And even when I attended Norfolk State, I attended Norfolk State when there were absolutely no white students, no white faculty, no white staff. Everything was Black, including the ROTC program that I participated in. Everything was 100% Black at Norfolk State. And now we got white guys on the football team. You got white professors there. You got whites on staff and a host of white students that are there just to get an education. So things have changed. And that's why so many kids wanted to go to the UCLA and wanted to go to the Carolina so they could be seen by the professionals, because their goal was to get in the NFL and the NBA to make money. Mm-hmm. And they knew it was going to be difficult through Mississippi Valley State, Grambling, Southern, Norfolk State, NCCU, Florida State, if whatever. It was going to be very, very difficult to get to the big leagues through an HBCU school.
Yeah.
And I'm glad to see that turn around.
I am too. We could talk about HBCUs for days, and I do want to get you in on this, Dr. McFarlane, but we're going to do it in the new year because I want to talk to you about the changing nature of Fayetteville State, where you are right now. But in the meantime, we got to take a break because I hear some music. So when we come back, we're going to talk about the tornadoes in Kentucky. We're going to talk about the trial that's going on in Minnesota, Omicron, in January the 6th, if we can squeeze that all in. On the way out, you're going to see more bell hooks talking about rage. And then when we come back, we'll try to wrap it all up. You're watching The Deal.
And when the white world doesn't feel like there's something to be had in these books for themselves, they don't talk about them. So that's like the underground bell hooks. But one of the things that my sisters sometimes get mad at me because I always write about their stories, because I know their stories better than other people. But one of the things that I wrote about was my sister's household. One of my sisters, I have 5 sisters, that I felt there was a lot of verbal violence in the household, and I talked to her about it. I was like, what's going on here? The way that you're talking, get your black ass over here. If you don't get, I'm sick of you. If you don't get, I'm gonna kill you. If you don't get down here. All the ways that we accept the dehumanization of Black children through the voice, through verbal abuse. And I wrote about that in Sisters of the Yam, that part of knowing, but again, many of us have heard that all our life. So people don't think of it as abuse. They think of it as, well, this is just, you got to get them to mind.
Being prepared is a part of who you are. But it's especially important in the case of a disaster. Be informed about possible emergencies in your area. Make a plan that covers where you go in an emergency. Build a kit with the things you need to survive. There's no one more capable of planning for your situation than you. Start your plan today. Go to ready.gov/myplan.
John Avlon with a reality check.
Hours after a devastating December tornado tore through Kentucky, causing more than 200 miles of destruction, Senator Rand Paul was asking President Joe Biden for aid from the federal government. Now, this is pretty standard stuff, except for the fact that it came from Rand Paul. Because the Kentucky senator, who hails from the first family of American libertarians, has a long record of opposing federal aid for disaster victims. except apparently when it impacts his constituents.
And welcome back to our final segment of the deal. It is Saturday, December 18th, 2021. Dr. McFarlane has a mission today to find me the perfect Christmas gift. So we're going to be waiting on that. On the way back in, you saw the state of Kentucky. It was devastating. The tornadoes, the longest sustained tornado on ground that anybody can recall in the state of Kentucky, traveled over 200 miles, wiped out the whole town of Mayfield, Kentucky, a place that I've been to before. I've been throughout Kentucky. I'm actually a Kentucky colonel, Val. I don't know if you knew that. The governor's father, the other governor, Brashear, made me a Kentucky colonel because of the work I did during the tornado outbreak in an ice storm in Kentucky many moons ago. I traveled to every county in Kentucky, which is no small feat, because it's literally Appalachia, you know, the hollers. And I went to a church that handled snakes. I mean, I did everything, Val, in Kentucky. And we had just talked about Bell Hooks, who was from Kentucky, from that same area of Southwest Kentucky that suffered so much damage. Real quick about that, because I do want to move on, but I did want to play the clip of talking about the hypocrisy of Rand Paul, Val. He constantly talks about not giving aid to people under any circumstances. And he was the first person to demand that Joe Biden give aid to the state of Kentucky. Just talk real quick about the hypocrisy of Rand Paul.
There's nothing to say, Ed. These guys have no shame. They are only interested in one thing, that's getting reelected, and they don't care how they do it. And so I've stopped even trying to evaluate, trying to put logic or reason to what they do. It does not exist. So I tried everything I can do to refrain from letting this come up on my radar as a item of interest. I just can't do it, because as one of my favorite authors and journalists, George Will, one of your favorites, said, you can't use logic to move somebody from a position that they arrived at illogically. And so I just don't, I can't do it. I can't use my brain to try to figure out what these guys are doing.
I agree with you. So we're going to move on from Kentucky. Let's just say we hope that those folks recover, but you know, the work I used to do, some people will never recover. I do want to switch gears though. I want to talk about January the 6th, because unbelievably, we're coming up on nearly a year when the government was potentially overthrown by some folks. Let's look at a clip real quick. This is your buddy, Val, the other person from Kentucky, the other senator, Mitch McConnell.
Republicans and reached out to Mark Meadows asking for Donald Trump to get more involved and do more on January 6th to secure this building. Were you personally in contact with Mark Meadows that day and other White House officials to urge Trump to do more?
Yeah, I was not, but I do think we're all watching, as you are, what is unfolding on the House side. And it will be interesting to reveal all the participants that were involved.
So Val, Mitch McConnell says he's interested in finding out about, you know, all these people who were engaged in talking to Donald Trump on 1/6 about, you know, the overthrow attempt. And you know that Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell don't get along. I do not like Mitch McConnell. You don't like Mitch McConnell. Dr. McFarlane doesn't like Mitch McConnell, but he seems to be willing to let the shoe fall where it might when it comes to these people who were talking to Donald Trump. I'll start with you, Val, and bring it to you, Nicole. What's the game between Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump on this? Does Mitch McConnell really care? Because he still needs to maintain control or regain control of the Senate. So he has to have those people come out to vote, but is it that he just doesn't seem to be willing to do it the Donald Trump way?
I wish I could be helpful, Ed, but I can't. It's difficult to get into the minds of these guys who think as they do. and strategize and plan as they do, all I can say is nothing logical. It's nothing that you or I or Nicole or any other sane person would come up and say, I'm going to do this because of that, or I've always felt this way and I do this for my people. These guys don't think in those terms along those lines. If we're using those kinds of measurements to try to figure out why he came up with this and where is he going with that, we run the risk of really being so far off base because what we're trying to measure, we have the wrong instrument to do the measuring with these guys. You just can't do it. I'm sorry for not being able to answer that question for you.
No, I think that's an adequate answer, though, right? We don't know what's in their mind. So, Dr. McFarlane, we do, though, realize that there are people out there who are willing to follow demagogues. And I say it all the time. I believe we've never had a democracy in the United States. I think that's pretty clear. We've hardly had a republic. We basically like people to rule us. Even though we got rid of the king, supposedly in the revolution, the presidential role or the ascendant role of whoever's in charge has to be somebody who's charismatic, somebody who pushes a position like maintaining slavery, like maintaining, oppression of Black folks or whatever. That's always been what's run America. And I think Donald Trump is in that pantheon of those kind of leaders. I think a lot of white people would rather have an autocrat in charge. I mean, talk to me a little bit about.
A lot of Black people would rather have an autocrat in charge, quietly as it's kept. That's just true. I mean, people are sheeple. I mean, my father used to use that expression all the time. He didn't call them people, call them sheeple. People like to be led. People like to follow. I think that's generally the nature, and especially when we are under times of under stress, under times of great cultural change. People want a daddy to tell them what to do, and I think that is I think a lot of Black people really like Donald Trump, and I think there's still a lot of just as many. I know in my own family. And I know this is probably true in a lot of Black families. We had arguments with our family members too about Donald Trump. Did we not? It wasn't just white people falling out with family members. Val, you probably have more control over your family than other people. I don't know about that, but seriously, you have those cousins, you had those brothers, you had, that family member, those uncles. I had nieces, by the way, who were just okay with it. They were like, so who cares? It's just another guy. And a lot of people really liked the Republicans and Donald Trump and the ilk and the Mitch McConnells and the Rand Pauls, because it's good for their pockets. A lot of people are really they like not having to really pay their taxes. They liked not being regulated in their small businesses. They liked not having that type of governmental oversight. I think that we like being told what to do, just up to a certain point, where we don't want anybody to touch our money. There's that paradox, and I think that they just fall perfectly within that line. I'm at the point where I'm refusing to believe that it's just of course Donald Trump does unleash a certain amount of overt racism for his constituency of working class white folk, and not just working class white folk, business class owning white folk. A lot of those people at January 6th, some of them, didn't they fly in on their own private jets? Yeah. They were staying at not a seedy hotel.
They were staying at the Trump Hotel in downtown.
That's a nice, right? And then there's this other hotel, I can't remember the name of, but it's actually one of the nicer hotels.
They were at the Wheeler. Yeah,
that's a nice hotel. Yeah. And so it's never going to, I just want us to stop getting to the point where we keep painting this really wide brush and of, pretending that, we could see clearly white people think this and Black people think this politically. I think that at the base of it, we are Americans, and at the base of it, there's like Americans who they like feeling exceptional until they have to do something different.
Right.
So yeah,
I get it. Yeah. So Val, like I said, my argument for years has been that the religion in America is not Christianity; it's Americanism. That it's a whole separate thing by itself. Jesus just happens to be the stand-in for the head deity in Americanism. But we'll have to have a whole show about that. I'll make a whole bunch of people mad. A knock-on of this, Val, is up in Minnesota. There's another trial of another cop shooting a black person that happens to be on camera. This time it's Kim Potter. There was a routine traffic stop for outbreak light. Turns out this guy also had a warrant for a bench warrant for assault on female, but it quickly turned into this officer shooting the young man and him dying on camera. Let's look at a clip real quick, and I want you to try to deconstruct something for me, because we've seen it 2 other times recently.
Do any of those things on April 11th, did you? No. You stopped doing your job completely. You didn't communicate what happened over the radio, right? No. You didn't make sure any officers knew what you had just done, right? No. You didn't run down the street and try to save Dante Wright's life, did you? No. You didn't check on the other car that had been hit, did you? No. That all happened just down the road from you. Yes. You were focused on what you had done, because you had just killed somebody. Right? I'm sorry it happened.
So Val, usually you don't take the stand when you've killed somebody. That's like the one thing you don't do. But in 3 trials recently, white folks have got on the stand and cried after they killed a black person, or after they killed a person because of the Kyle Rittenhouse. He killed white people, but they took the risk of putting them on the stand, and then you get a crying defendant, which usually works contrary to what normally happens. Is that a new strategy, that I'll just put a crying person on the stand and that should help me out?
I think Rittenhouse's acquittal helped in the decisions going forward that the defense made in terms of putting their client on the stand. I think had Rittenhouse been convicted, we may have seen another type of strategy or tactic here. But at any rate, I'm glad to see him, on the stand, trying to put on the fake tears and that kind of thing. I've never seen so much bawling without any water in my life. I mean, I'm looking, where's the water? Where are the napkins and that sort of thing. And I just don't see it. I think it's a good audition for Academy Award here. These guys are doing some great acting, in my opinion, as I call it. But that's for the defense attorneys to make that decision, or try to convince their client to go that route and to go on stand and answer questions and do that sort of thing. But I don't know that much about the law. I'm not a lawyer, but I do know that it's a very dangerous tactic to put your client on the stand when they're going to be cross-examined by the prosecution. And the prosecution is looking for 2 things. The first is perjury about anything. It don't have to be about whether you actually killed somebody or not. You lied saying you tied your shoes on Tuesday and it was Wednesday. You lied about that. So that's the first thing they're looking for. They're trying to make them appear unsympathetic toward what has happened. They're trying to make them appear in many ways. And in a lot of cases, you don't know how the jury is being affected by all of this that's going on while you're doing that. So all of those things are risks that the defense is taking on when they put their client on the stand. And I didn't understand that in Rittenhouse. I didn't understand that in McMichael's, and I don't stand it here in the Officer Potter case. But that's the decision that was made. And we'll see in this last case, we know that Rittenhouse was successful, McMichael's was not. Potter, we don't know. We'll see, wait and see what happens with that. But if you tie me down and make me bet the house, I would say she won't be successful.
So any thoughts on this the crime defendants, Dr. McFarlane?
I mean, I don't think that it's new that they're putting that white murderers that are taking the stand in defense of killing Black people. I think the tiers are new. And I wish I had, because I think that it was easy to justify killing Black people in America, in the history of jurisprudence. It's been an easy case to make why Black people deserve to die, or that Black people have no rights to be respected by white people, or even like anti-racist fighters. Like that's clear that's not necessarily seen as a crime to the wider population. What I will say is, I wish I had $1 million worth of white tears in my pocket to pull out anytime I felt like it, because I don't have that. I mean, it must feel incredibly empowering to know that you could just start crying anytime you want to and just get all this sympathy. I think when Black people start crying in public, they're seen as emotional, irrational, dangerous, and erratic. And I just don't think that we would our emotions would garner the same amount of sympathy.
Yeah, we do not get the benefit of the doubt. Well, you know what? We're starting to run out of time, but I did want to talk about one other thing real quick, and I'll probably just comment on this. We're going to play a clip, and then I'll talk about it when we come back.
Sam, very good morning to you. Can we end the week with some slightly better news from South Africa around hospitalizations? How much can we tell from this data?
Yes, good morning, Anna. I mean, you can't beat that 91% reduction in the number of hospitalizations in this wave is fantastic. Oh, I have been saying all along that we need to wait enough weeks for the data to build, and I think we're getting there. It would be surprising if the number suddenly changes next week. Maybe it goes up a little bit or doesn't, but I think this is pretty good indication that if you have a demographic and immunity background that looks like South Africa, then you might be in better shape than if you don't. And I think I'm going to actually just spending some time looking at these numbers for the rest of the developed world to see what it looks like.
Okay, so yes, you've cautioned us in the past about not reading too much into data from other locales because, of course, of different age profiles, different demographic pictures, different history of virus variants. The South African story, of course, we know they had a different variant there for a while that seemed to take off, and different vaccination levels, and all those important to mention. I also wonder, when we're talking about percentages of infections that end up in hospital, you're relying on a sort of consistent approach to testing, and you're relying on an ability to compare the current situation with previous waves, which we'd hope you can do, but I guess there might be some uncertainty there.
Yes, I mean, in this data, as it's being gathered, there's no way to triage a lot of that and study it and analyze it. But frankly, even if it turns out to be 50% less and not 91% less, it's still great. But yes, whatever shape it turns out to be, once you've had the detail, I think this is looking good.
So Omicron, there's another variant of COVID. It doesn't seem to kill people like Delta has, but it does make you sick. It spreads really rapidly. One of the things that I will say about it is if you have a booster, it seems to work even more effectively and even keeping the symptoms down. Folks, if you're going to be with family and friends for the holidays, keep that in mind. Think about there are still people dying. So where I am in Wake County, and I think Dr. McFarlane's here in Wake County right now too, it's one of the most vaccinated counties in the country. So we have seen a sharp decline in cases and deaths and everything here where we are, but there's still pockets in the country where they're at 40%. I can go one county down to Harney County where I was born. They're only still at 40%, 48%, I think I saw the other day. So I'll put a pin in that. Be careful if you're out there. We're running out of time. So let's do what we always do. I'll start with you first, Val. What do we got to look forward to? Anything you're working on? Blah, blah, blah.
Well, I got birthdays, and I got basketball season has started for me. I'm coaching in Cary Parks and Rec, and we got 13 and 14-year-olds, and I've been coaching them for a long, long time. And I tell people the reason I stick with that age group is because they're easier to coach because they already know everything there is to know. So I'm sticking with that, and I can't wait for the season to get started. So I'm happy now. I've been waiting for this for 2 years. The season was postponed or eliminated last year, so this is a big issue for me. I'm like a little kid in a grocery store. I'm ready to go.
All right, and Dr. McFarlane, what do we got to look forward to? What are you working on?
I am looking forward to the solstice. See, my tree, as my tree indicates, in fact, I'm not a huge fan of like the corporate holiday, but I'm a pagan at heart, I have to be honest. And and I'm looking forward to the return of the sun. I'm looking forward to the days getting longer again. I'm looking forward to getting back out there. I'm looking forward to 2022. I'm hoping that we continue to battle COVID. I'm looking forward to things. I don't know if I want to say returning back to normal, but becoming something more tenable for everyone's emotional, mental, and physical health.
So there you go. I want to remind you folks, we will not be here next Saturday. We're going to take a day off, giving them a day off from their no pay job of being on the deal. And we'll return at the beginning of the new year. However, there will be a special look for it sometime during the week next week is what's your top news story. So if you have a story, you can make a video for us, try to keep it under a minute or two. And just tell me what your top story is. So for all the listeners out there, you can submit those videos too. If you send stuff to Ed at thedealwithedclark.com, we're going to put together a little package of stuff, and it'll show up. And then I want Dr. McFarlane and Val and some of the other folks who've been on with us to do the same thing. So you may see these little 1-minute videos show up about what's the top story for you for the year. In the meantime, if you're going to go out in the zoo, please be careful and be nice to people. Don't worry about a parking space. Don't worry about if somebody pulls in front of you. Any of that stuff. We don't want to see any crazy mess on the news tonight. In the meantime, go out and do something good for somebody. And in the meantime, we'll see you in the new year. Bye.
All right, bye.
Work home, work home, work home.
I said to my Democratic colleagues over the last several days, number one, unfortunately, the vast majority of our Republican friends have made it clear that they have no intention of trying to work with us to address voter suppression or to protect voting rights.